Hello, everyone. Welcome to Valley Sports Rewind. I'm Mike Cannici, and I'm very excited today because for as long as I can remember, I've always heard about Kasden softball. I remember Kasden basketball, but I was a little young for Kasden softball, and we have two gentlemen here who played a big part in that softball team. We have Jack Walsh, and Jack, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
And we have a fellow Connecticut School of Broadcasting grad, Dave Barone. And Dave, I want to thank you for coming on as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so Jack, I'll start with you. How did Kasden softball originate?
Well, the origins go back to when we were in high school. Very first team was Daddy-O's Market, which is a small meat market in Derby. And I can recall our very first game, we always started at the top, was against Simonetti's in the Valley Tournament at the end of the year. They were the best team in the Valley, and we were a bunch of kids. Obviously, we got killed, but that was a start. Then for a couple of years, we were chipping quarters to pay the umpires.
Right.
And that was the Derby Mets. And then my brother and I went to work at Dutchess when it first opened, and Dutchess became the sponsor for 2 years. And then Gene Fitzpatrick and Kasden came along. That was 1969, and the rest is history.
Right. So let me ask you, when you and your brother played for Dutchess, did you two run the team, or was it a little different before Kasden came?
It kind of evolved, again, from just a group of neighborhood kids to Jimmy and I kind of running it. And down through the years, there were a lot of different voices that thought they were running the team, but it was a lot of fun. But Jimmy did most of the organizing, more than I did.
Right. So let me ask you, that first team, I mean, how many players were on that first team, would you say?
The first team in 69?
Right.
Oh, I think we went through about 25 players that year.
Right. And, the thing is, it's difficult to try to please everyone because trying to get 25 into the game, what was the biggest challenge? How did you work it where, you were able to get everybody some playing time?
We played a lot of games.
Right.
We played more games than most people did at that time.
A lot of double headers, too?
Well, the peak year we played over 125 games, so you play that many games, you need a lot of bodies.
Right.
And, it evolved. When we started, we weren't a great team. When it got to be Dutchess, we got a little better. I think Dave sitting here was the first year that really it was Kasden as Kasden. It was the first year we made the state tournament.
Right.
Dave came along with Eddie Glenn, made our infield. All of a sudden we had an infield, made a big difference. And, down through the years, people came and went, but Kasden was a constant.
Right. Dave, let me ask you, Jack just mentioned, at times you played 130 games. That's almost like, Major League Baseball, they play 162. How did you guys juggle that between work and, other things going on with families and stuff?
Well, it wasn't easy. That's why you see so many softball players and these teams have a high divorce rate. Us, we just loved it. I mean, we guys would all work days. The games are usually at 6:30 at night. So it wasn't really a problem for us. And we were young at the time. We were all in our early 20s. So it was just it was a great time.
And
people, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And what was the weekend like? Did you guys double up a lot on the weekend? I mean, did you play morning games too?
Oh God, if we were in a tournament and we were doing well, we could play 5 games in 2 days, 6 games in 2 days. Yeah. Especially if we were on the road, because we went away a lot. We traveled a lot.
Right. You know what I find interesting, Jack, is for our Hall of Fame, I do a lot of research at the library, so I'm constantly, looking at the old Evening Sentinels, and they gave a lot of press to Kasden. I mean, if you look in the paper, you see different articles about the team. So, I mean, the Sentinel covered you guys very well.
The Sentinel was unbelievable and it's ironic we're at the Valley Indie Sentinel, which is the revival and digital form of the Sentinel. But the Sentinel had incredible sports coverage. Lime Katzman was unbelievable. All the games were in the paper for the 2 leagues that we played in, the VIL, Valley Independent League, and Valley Major League. And you would call Lime after the games at night, and the write-ups would be in the paper the next day. But again, we played a lot of games besides that, and Kasden paid a lot of money to sponsor our teams.
Right.
Okay. And, we felt that they had to get something in return. So we made sure that all of our games got in the paper. So if if they weren't being covered by the by Lime through the VIL or Valley Major League, we played something else. We would do a write-up and give it to the paper, and it would get in.
Right.
And they would have the standings in at least once or twice a week. I think you saw on Facebook, I posted the cartoons that Dana Tinty did.
Right.
People were able to follow it. Today, you really don't see that kind of local recreation coverage. You see the high school coverage, but you don't see that kind of thing anymore. And it was a big popular. Softball was amazingly popular. We didn't have enough fields.
Right.
That became a real issue. But as Dave said, have team, we'll play.
Yep.
Right. And I think what you guys were able to do for, the Sentinels, especially the sports section, is, when late spring comes, June and up until September, there's really no local high school sports going on in the summer and stuff. So this gave the Sentinel, the sports people, something to cover during the summer. So I think that was a big help for them as well. And it definitely, kept people reading the Sentinel during the summer.
It was also a reason for sponsorships.
Right.
If you were a local restaurant or a bar or any group, you sponsored, this was a way of getting a return. People knew your name because it was in the paper constantly. I would guess that during the summer, probably 75% of the days, you'd find an article about Kasden in the Sentinel. And the same for a lot of the other teams. Even though they didn't play as many games as we did, it was an important piece. I often talk to Mr. Fitz about it. What a great guy he was. In fact, he's in the ASA Hall of Fame.
Right.
They couldn't really measure the value of that, but they felt it was important, so they continued doing it. We would never have been Kasden without him. I have to give him all the credit in the world. Just the nicest gentleman you ever met in your entire life.
Right. Now, Dave, let me ask you, I'm sure over the years you guys developed some rivalries with the other softball teams. Bill Pucci told me about a team he played on that always gave you guys a good game. I can't remember the name of it, but just talk about some of the teams. Right. Just talk about some of the teams that you guys played that would eventually become rivals for you.
First and foremost would be Preston Machine.
Right.
They were, if they were 1, we were 1A, or if we were 1, they were 1A. And it wasn't, I don't know how to put it, wasn't slow pitch softball players. There was athletes on the field.
Right.
We would win games 2-1, 3-2, turn double plays. Today, or even 15 years ago, I watched kids playing. They have a left-hander at shortstop.
Right.
It's just
They
game
just
is
went out
not
scoring.
evolved. Right. It changed so much. With Slies, right, Sylvester's. What's the team from Milford? Devon News. Stony Brook. Not Stony Brook.
Stony Brook. Yeah.
I mean,
teams from Seymour.
They had a bar in Stratford, and they had a poster, a cartoon like Dana did.
Right.
Of us going off a cliff, Kasden Field,
in
their bar. I mean, we were not the most well-liked team in the state of Connecticut.
Right.
Because we voiced ourselves. We were loud.
Right.
Softball was loud when we started. It toned down. That was kind of a style of play that could get you in trouble.
Right.
But people could love it. I remember we went to a tournament in York, Pennsylvania. It was a big tournament. Mm-hmm. I don't know, it was Dave or Ed Glenn's idea instead of wearing hats. Because, Kasden was in uniform.
Right.
You know that. I mean, uniform.
And we'll get to that in a
full
minute.
Uniform. Yeah. But for some reason, I think it was Eddie came with putting a bandana on instead of wearing a hat. So we said, okay, but everybody has to do it. And we were loud, and the people there were shocked. We were playing in a minor league baseball stadium.
York Pirates.
Right, which was a Pittsburgh Pirate franchise, which had the first AstroTurf field before they put it in Three Rivers. And the people couldn't understand us. They thought we were absolutely nuts. The first night we played, the game was loud, it was boisterous, and the people were actually kind of hostile. At the end of the game, some guy came running into the dugout screaming, "You think you're so good? Wait till tomorrow when you play AMF." I think they were national champions.
The bowling team,
and the next morning, we beat them. And by the end, when we finished, we won our division, but then
we came in third
overall.
Yep.
Right.
But they were asking us to sign autographs. They thought we were.
Well, what happened was
crazy.
During one of the games later on in the tournament, York Barbell they were all Jack Hunts, every player.
Right.
One guy hit it dead center field, bounced over the fence 410 feet away. So the umpire goes, double. We go, are you nuts? Go around. That's a home run.
Right.
So they knew that we weren't a bunch of punks.
Yeah.
Right. You know, as you said, you had a lot of different members over the years. A few guys that would play for you guys, they'd end up being former coaches or coaches in some level. I could think of Jack Hunt, who you just mentioned, Jimmy Del Volpe, Charlie DeCenzo, John DeFrancisco, just to name a few. So, I mean, it was a who's who of people on that team. I mean, I think everybody that lived in Derby or Ansonia played for that team one time or another.
Well, that was also one of the unusual things. You know, back then, if you were from Ansonia, you didn't talk to Derby. And
Yeah.
Derby didn't talk to Ansonia. Probably the only place that happened was at Kasden.
Yeah.
And it was peaceful coexistence, I guess I would describe it.
Sibling rivalry.
And I always heard, though, that they never brought up football to each other.
Not during softball season. But at the same time, you know, you mentioned the coaching. You know, I always say that Miami of Ohio was legendary as the cradle of coaches for college.
Right.
Kasden was the cradle of coaches for high school sports in the Valley. Again, take a look at the record of people who played on Kasden and went on to be head coaches in the Valley. Their overall record, the number of league and state championships, it really is incredible.
Right.
And I think a lot of that, I don't want to say a lot, I don't want to give too much credit, but I think some of that came from Kasden. You know, it wasn't always easy to play for Kasden. You talked about the uniforms. I mean, again, you know.
And you and your brother Jimmy were big on that. And let me ask you, when you're running a team like that and you have so many guys and you've got egos, as you know, people have egos, how hard was it for you and Jimmy to, number one, keep everybody happy, but number two, you know, be stern about that? Like, say, did it ever happen where somebody didn't show up with the right uniform on? I mean, did you have to bench some people?
Well, there's the legendary but true story. The answer is no. If you were there to play, you wore the uniform, and we had a lot of uniforms. So you had
to be smart like me and keep every uniform in your trunk of your car.
Yeah.
Right.
Then you look out in the field, see what Jimmy and Jackie were wearing, then you put that on.
Because we had a lot of different uniforms, but the most famous story was Mark Fitzpatrick, who was a great athlete for me in Ansonia.
Right.
His father was the sponsor. And you know, keep in mind, when we started, it was the era of Joe Namath, and remember Joe caused quite a stir when he showed up with white shoes, football shoes.
Right.
And also, we were playing a game at Colony Pung on Colony Park in Ansonia, and Mark shows up, and he's wearing white spikes. My brother looked at him and said, "Mark, what are those?" He saw, they're my new spikes.
Right.
Jimmy looked and said, "We were black." And Mark said, No, we're going to try something. No, we're not trying anything, though. We were black.
Right.
Mark didn't play.
And how did he take it? Was he disappointed or?
No, I think he came to accept it. And, you know, Mark was a competitor. I can recall one time we played in a tournament in Brantford. Okay.
Right.
And Mark broke his ankle. Okay. Ended up playing in a game that went 14 innings on a broken ankle.
Really?
He was tough as nuts. You know, he was a great athlete. But, you know, hey, he came to accept those were the team rules.
Right.
You know, again, it goes back to we had a sponsor that put a lot of money into it.
Right.
You know, we represented the sponsor.
Right.
So if you're representing someone, you represent them the way they're supposed to be represented. So, and even though guys griped about it and whatnot, if you look at all of them when they became head coaches of whatever sport they were, their players were.
Paul Sponheimer was big on that. If you came out with the wrong thing, he didn't care if you were a superstar. You weren't playing. I mean, you had to have, you know, the proper.
Man. He even joked about that at his retirement dinner
when he spoke for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
A record breaker.
Oh Lord.
Right.
He was a tough guy.
Right. So let me ask you, Dave, what position did you normally play when you were out there?
Second
base.
I always played second base.
Right.
I probably went through 4 shortstops.
Oh yeah.
And everyone was as good as the last one.
Really?
I mean, we were a talented defensive
And how
team.
did you guys find these guys? Like that I'm always curious about that. You said Derby and Ansonia never talked except for Kasden. So how did you get the Jack Hunts, the Jim Del Vopes, all these guys from Ansonia? How did you get, guys from Derby for that
I could
matter,
give you
too?
when I was playing at Milford Academy, I was playing hardball, and I hit like 390. My cousin Freddie Kumo was
Right.
playing with Kasden, and he said, "Come and play slow pitch softball."
Right.
I said, "Come on, I'm not going to play that silly game. It's for girls." Somehow he talked me into it. I hit 390 in hardball. My first year at Kasden, I hit 380. So I
Really?
realized, let's go. But I knew Dell, I knew Jack Hunt.
Right.
So we would talk at the KO club, and then Jimmy and Jackie would get involved, and there was no animosity. That wasn't part of it.
Right.
Look, to compete at a certain level, you need better players.
Now, would it be certain members on the team would talk to somebody and then go back to you and say, this guy's interested in playing,
Yeah.
So it
Yeah,
basically.
it was all word. I told you I've got a printout. I went back to look and see how many guys actually played for Kasden at one time or another. Actually, I've got Dutchess on this list too, and I found 125 different guys played at least one game.
That's unreal.
Because some people only played one game. I've got one guy that played in a game, never batted. I think he was a pinch runner in a game, a tournament. We must have needed somebody. So, there were a lot of people that came in and out.
It was
but,
an honor.
And it was hard to keep doing it, as people got jobs or had
Right.
kids, it became harder for them to do it. So people were in and out, but we were fortunate. We had an awful lot of good people that came through Kasden.
People would sit on the bench. They would
yeah.
they would
Just to
come
be on that
100
team,
games.
right.
My brother, God rest his soul, was the
Yeah.
backup second baseman behind me.
Right.
He very rarely played. He played in the VAL games. He was a good ball player,
Yes.
but I'm not saying I was better, but he scored pinch run in the state tournament game.
Big
he
one.
scored the winning run, right?
In the longest game ever played.
Yep. And you would have thought we just won the World Series of Major League Baseball.
He was so excited.
The whole team was excited
Right.
for
For
him
him.
too. It was just a great feeling, and I was happy as
It was
all.
a big moment. That was the
Yeah.
longest game ever played in state ASA tournament history.
Silco, was that the team?
Silco.
Right.
Okay. But I have to give your brother props. Okay.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say.
King in his court.
Okay. Well, what's the Joni Joyce?
Joni Joyce. I'm
Okay.
sorry,
We
you're
played
right.
in a benefit game one time at Ryan Field. I don't know who we played, but the second game, Joni Joyce was there, and she was pitching against all these guys from a lot of different teams in the Valley, and of course, no one could touch her, except Gary Barone.
Yep.
Right.
Gary Barone stepped to the plate and was 2 for 2. Just whoop.
Really?
Right up the middle.
And he was
So
a
he
backup
ba-
player.
He
Wow.
batted 1,000 against the greatest
Jo-
woman's fast pitch pitcher in history, and had a higher average than he did playing with Kasden.
And scored the winning run in the longest softball
right.
game in state
Yeah.
history. So there you go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
What was the game we turned all the double plays? Was that PYMC?
We had one game where we had 5 double
I
plays.
think it was
in the seventh.
PYMC.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Jack, if I'm not mistaken, you primarily did all the pitching, correct?
I did a lot of it in the early years, but John D also pitched.
Right.
Glenn Canton came in
Glenn
later,
Catton
much
played
later.
the last couple of years. So Dell played a little bit. We had the famous one pitch incident from Dell, and if he's listening, Dell, I have to get this in. We were playing in the state tournament, and we're playing Freddie Salvati's team. I don't remember what the name
From
of the
East
team
Haven.
was. It was on a Saturday.
Metal Masters?
Might have been Metal
think it
Masters.
was.
Okay.
Right.
And it came down to the bottom of the 7th inning. I think we might have been ahead by a run, but they had 2 runners on base, and Freddie was up with 2 outs. And I pitched, and Freddie popped out to first base. Okay.
Wow.
The first base umpire, after the out was called, started screaming, "I called no pitch." Well, a no pitch means that it doesn't count. Now,
Right.
No one heard him, and as the pitcher, I went nuts. I got thrown out of the game.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
Wow.
I got thrown
Yeah.
out of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, which meant you had to leave the field. It was at Ray Bestos, so I had to put my sneakers on. I was walking out. The game resumes. Dell had to take my place, and he threw one pitch to Freddie, before I got out of the area,
Right.
Freddie hit a 3-run homer and we lost.
Oh my God. Wow.
So that's not a pleasant memory for
was
Dell. But
devastating.
Dell was a heck of a player. What a great first baseman he was.
Right.
We had great infields.
Jimmy Sly. Oh my goodness.
Jimmy Sly after Dell. Freddie Kershaw after Eddie Glenn.
Yeah.
Steve Hiroshik at third base. Steve could, was great.
Gary Cormack.
Gary Cormack after Steve.
Yeah.
We had great defensive teams.
Tokarts played a year with us.
Yeah. No, he didn't. John never played.
He didn't play the year with us?
No. Played against us a lot, but he didn't play with us.
I remember I had gotten LT Giventorio was going to play with us. Then he came down to Jay Davids. The day before practice resumed, he was going to start, and he goes, no, I can't do it.
Yeah. We were, I think, pretty good defensively. We never had enough home run hitters.
Right.
That was our draw. We didn't score enough runs, but we're pretty good on an open field.
Right. And, you talked about, you said earlier about you think Kasden gets a little credit for all the coaches who would go on to coach and stuff by what they learned playing at Kasden,
And the people they were with.
Right.
It had that kind of environment.
But
Everybody was serious about it.
I also think what Kasden did as well is it built friendships, because Jack Hunt gets married. His best man is Paul Sponheimer. Paul Sponheimer gets married. His best man is Jimmy Del Volpe. So these are guys who probably didn't really know each other that great until they started playing for Kasden, and they built friendships. And I think that's probably the best thing that it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You play with somebody, especially if you play 125
They lived together,
games.
Del and Spooney.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
A lot of friendships, a lot of great memories. And, we were fortunate to win a lot of games. I mentioned we actually won over 1,000 games.
Right.
Okay, I'm guessing that's probably a record in the Valley.
Maybe anywhere. Not many teams stayed as many years as we did.
And do you think you guys, in a big, in some way, kind of put men's softball on the map? Because years later, you would see, especially in the Derby League, you'd have Pepe's, you'd have PYMC, Adzima's Funeral Home, and there were some good rivalries there. And then, Pepe's especially with Jeff Toney, he was playing softball all over the place to the point where he was getting paid.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, the league that you guys played in with Kasden, all the tournaments you did, really kind of built men's softball?
Valley Major League, I believe, with Kasden and Preston and Sylvester's was pretty good in Shelton.
Right. And then we also played in the State League.
Right.
Okay.
Raven,
I think we were the first Valley team to go out and want to play all of us. I mentioned the very first game is the old Daddy-O's Market. We played the best team in the Valley. But we always did that. We played in tournaments.
How many years did we get lumped up by AFCO when we first started playing?
Even though we kind of got our revenge in 72.
Right.
72 was probably the peak year for Valley softball, even though it ended up being Preston's year. Going into the state tournament, AFCO Lycoming had been the national champs in industrial. And a team from Southington, Ciccio Holmes, had been, in all the national tournaments, had the guy that was considered the best player in Connecticut, Donnie Hanson.
Right.
And they put those two teams together for that year. And I remember we had a Kasden tournament. They won our tournament a couple weeks before the state tournament. And the Post had written an article talking about them being the greatest team ever assembled in slow pitch softball in Connecticut. Talked about the state tournament, and it was just them and everybody else.
Right.
Okay, well, guess who we played the first game? We played them the first game. Just we're a complete afterthought to what they were. They started the game. They scored, I think it was 3 runs in the first inning, something like that, and would have had more, except Steve Tracy,
Right.
ball player.
flagged down a ball at the fence and threw out a guy at third base.
A laser beam.
As Steve was known for, and completely changed the game. And then we turned around and destroyed them.
Really?
Absolutely destroyed them.
And that had
I
to be a
remember
great feeling.
that guy, Donnie Hanson, was considered the greatest player in the state, grounded back to me to end the game. Okay, he didn't even run all the way to first base. Halfway down to first, he took his shirt off,
Oh, God.
threw it in the dugout at all the other guys, and said to them, "You're a bunch of losers. I'm done." So we beat him, and then they got beat the next game. They got knocked out of the tournament.
Really?
Okay?
And this was the greatest team ever assembled.
That's what had been
Right.
said. Our next game, we had to play Cordigianos, who were the defending state champs or had been state champs. And we were losing to them by 7 runs in the bottom of the 7th inning.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and came back and scored 8 runs. Dave Del Volpe hit a home run over the fence to win the game.
Wow.
That was crazy. So
That was the first time we hit one out of there, too.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And it turns around. We lost to Preston 7-6 in the championship game. So the Valley teams finished first and second in the state tournament that
Didn't
year.
they always used to
Wow.
send 2 teams to the Worlds? This year
Yeah.
they sent 1, so
yeah.
we didn't go.
Yeah. Well, they had to
Wow.
win in New England. That was probably the high point. And then slowly after that, the softball started to change. Okay.
Right.
Teams didn't want to play at that high level. So all of a sudden, instead of just having a state tournament, you had all kinds of division. I don't know how far down they got. They got to at least C, and teams started sandbagging and trying to move down.
Wasn't there only 3 of us in the major at one time?
Yeah,
Us,
and then
Preston, and Shelton team.
maybe 4 or
Maybe
5,
4.
and then it wasn't worth playing in the major
No.
because it wasn't. So we dropped down to A, but we never wanted to play in a lower division. We wanted to play in that upper division, and we had teams. There was a team. I think it might have even been Norwich in the B. Went to the national tournament.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
They did.
Right.
And a lot of credit. They had a lot of great ball players, but we didn't want to play at that level. We
Right.
wanted to play
We
against
didn't
the
want to
best.
play in the VIL, but we did it for the sponsor.
Right.
Because we won it every year. I don't think we ever
We finished second one year.
one year.
Yeah.
And that was a tough because I owned the bar. On Saturday. That was tough for me Sunday mornings.
And that's the thing too is, it became like real games in the sense where you see Derby play Ansonia in a football game and they hated each other. It was kind of like that with softball where there were rivals and you kind of took a loss to the heart, even though it's supposed to be for fun, the competitive part takes over.
Nothing's for fun when you put
All right.
that much time
And
into it.
we always wanted to get to the state tournament. When we started, there was only one bid
Yeah.
for the Valley. Only one team could go from the Valley, and it was. When I tell you, it was cutthroat. I mean, it was cutthroat. I mean, people cheated. I remember one year, very early, I don't know if it was 69 or 70. There was a team in the Valley. Who I'm not going to name them, but very ineligible.
Right.
Okay. I think they had 3 guys from New York State that they were bringing into play, and I think my brother, John D. and Rich Soup on the team went to New York and caught him.
Wow. That's
Okay.
unbelievable.
And I remember the ASA commissioner in the Valley wanted to make a deal with us. Okay, that he thought they were so good that maybe they could win for
For the Valley,
championship.
right.
That he would strike a deal so they could go to the state tournament and then they would stop playing. Well, I'm sorry, that's not the way it works. Okay, they were
Right.
guilty, and if we deserved to go, then we deserved to go, and if we didn't deserve to go, it was fine. But we want to play by the same rules as they did.
Right.
Okay, and I think Kasden was noted for that. We played by the rules.
Right.
But we had a good time. Eventually, the Valley ended up with more bids because it was so competitive. And
So
also,
many teams.
yeah, and when Valley teams went to Ray Bestos, Valley people went to the games.
Right.
We were money makers for
Yeah.
them. So that was part
Nolan
of it.
Field, Preston Kasden game.
Wow.
Yeah.
You couldn't get it. You couldn't get in there to watch the game.
Yeah.
Wow.
You ought to touch Jackie on Rich Zuba, our scorekeeper. If you hit 400 on Kasden
Yeah.
Field with him keeping score, you were hitting 600 on the other
Wow.
team.
He was tough.
Oh.
He was tough. He didn't play because football was his game. But
Right.
yeah, he was tough.
Oh, he was.
We had a
funny.
lot of good times.
We did.
you mentioned that your biggest flaw was you didn't have a lot of home run hitters. But, I could think of one player who I've been hearing a lot about in the past week since I was going to have you guys on, who hardly hit the ball, out of the infield, but yet batted over 600 every year because of his speed. And, of course, that's your brother, Jimmy. And, John D. and Charlie were both saying how Jimmy developed a swing where he knew enough to, like, run up and hit the ball and just start running. Talk about your brother, Jim, and how...
Well, he was left-handed, so he had 1 foot out of the batter's box before he was going. But I have to correct you. In all the years we've played, there were only 2 players that ever hit 600 for a season.
I can name one of them.
Go ahead.
Kenny Kohansky.
Kenny Kohansky and Ernie DeStacy. Mm-hmm. Those are the only 2 that had 600.
Be sure to say something to John D.
Okay.
Kenny Kohansky was a machine.
But Jimmy was a believer in on-base percentage before Billy Bean in Oakland, and he was the leadoff hitter. So his job was to get on base. Didn't care how he got on base, but just got on base. But the great story is we went to Harrisburg to play in a tournament. We only had 10 guys. We didn't have a single substitute, okay?
Right.
We were playing most of our games in the middle of a low-income housing district,
project,
okay? And we had been there a couple years before, so they knew us a little bit. But we started, and we won our first game. This is Memorial Day, or maybe it was Labor Day. Second game,
we lost.
We got beat by just a god-awful team. I mean, it was embarrassing.
Right.
People were yelling at us as the game was over. You guys should be embarrassed. That was horrible. And, but it was a double elimination tournament.
Right.
So over the next 2 days, we ended up winning 9 straight games to win the tournament.
Wow.
But the fabulous part is we came out of the losers bracket. We had to beat we beat the Delaware State champs and a number of other teams. But we had to beat this team from Virginia. We beat them the first game. And now there's a pretty good crowd there, okay? And it was hot. Oh, God, it was hot. But my brother comes up to bat in the first inning, and the third baseman for this team from Virginia makes a show of taking a step in to basically challenge my brother.
Right.
I remember
my brother steps out of the batter's box and points the bat at him, saying, "I'm coming at you." Okay.
Right.
He steps back in. The guy takes another step in. And then the pitch comes, and sure enough, my brother hits it down the third base. And the third baseman catches the ball and guns it to first, throws it right over the first baseman's head, out of bounds. And here's the real story behind it. My brother took one step out of the batter's box, fell flat on his face, had cramps, couldn't have crawled to first base without a timeout, but he ends up on second base. We had to take a timeout and get salt tablets and all kinds of, because we had no substitutes.
Right.
He ends up on second base, and we win the tournament, and he was named the most valuable player.
Wow, that's awesome.
The people in the stands called him the White Rabbit. So he was pretty quick. I mean, the only time we ever had a foot race one-on-one, I beat him. I couldn't get to first base like him.
No, you were a right-handed hitter.
Yeah.
Right.
And I couldn't hit anyways.
And, talking to John D and stuff, he told me about a tournament. I believe it was in Virginia. I could be wrong, but you guys played a real good team. They were loaded, and John D was all pumped up. He hit a home run. He's feeling good. He gets to third base. The third baseman looks at him and goes, "Nice shot." But you're not winning the game, right? So, I mean,
pile drivers.
Virginia pile drivers.
Yeah, that's what it was. You're right. Yeah. And
they were national champs.
Yeah, and I think he said they won like 30-18. You guys gave him a good game. But that's the thing, too, is, you went out of state so much. And these teams, like, watching you guys in the tournament, you talked about your brother, that third baseman was challenging him. He obviously watched the other games and saw what your brother could do. And that's the thing with these other teams is, I mean, there were some good rivalries, and these were teams out of state. So it was a lot of fun.
Even locally, we got beaten that tournament, and a team that shall remain nameless started talking to people, saying, well, they didn't have to go to Virginia to get beat. We could beat them here anytime.
Right.
And, of course, word got back, and we ended up playing them on a Sunday morning at Ryan Field. You remember this one day?
I do.
And they came walking in, and Charlie DeCenzo, mild mannered Charlie DeCenzo, started going crazy on him and saying, "We didn't have to go to Virginia Beach. You guys could beat us." Not going to happen.
Yeah, you don't want to get Charlie angry.
Right.
And did we lay a beating on them that day? We were probably a little crazy.
Yeah, but we were serious. We
Yeah.
we didn't play bear games.
No,
didn't
we never
believe in-
played a
I
bear
wouldn't
game.
waste my time.
Yeah.
None of the guys would waste their time. We went there to play. We played to win.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then afterwards, we did what we had to do.
Right.
And we did that pretty well, too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they were good times. We had
We did.
a lot of great times, a lot of great and there were a lot of great players and teams in the Valley. It wasn't just
Right.
us. A lot of great teams. You know,
Yes.
I posted that cartoon from Dana Tinta the other day.
That was a great cartoon. Yeah.
You see some of the names of the teams.
Well, I think we were most proud of, we were a Valley team. We were not an all-star team. We were a Valley team. We picked up players, Rudy Skronsky, Valley guy.
Right.
You know, Steve Tracy, Valley guy. We didn't go Jimmy Dell
Right.
because Jimmy Dell was going to play second when I came. Then he moved over to third, and
I believe Derby, Shelton, Seymour, and Ansonia all played on that team one time or another. Somebody from those.
oh
towns.
Absolutely.
yeah, Richie
Right.
Bryce
Yeah.
and Freddie Kershaw from
Yeah.
Seymour,
Yeah.
Right.
Gary Cormack.
Right.
Gary's a good
Yeah.
player.
So I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it wasn't just Derby, Ansonia.
No.
You know,
no.
you represented everything, and you know, there's a funny story. I think you might have told me it, Jack. I can't remember, but you guys had lost the tournament. You came in second place, and if anybody knows Barry McDermott, he does not like to lose. So, one of you want to tell that story about
Go
what
ahead,
Barry did?
because you just gave the hint, so you know what it was.
Well, we came in second, which to Barry, second's not first.
Right.
So as we're walking out of Rebestis, he jams the trophy in the garbage bin. And
Jeez.
Jimmy Walsh just, oh my goodness, Jimmy runs and pulls it out because Mr. Fitz is not too happy with that.
And
Right.
worse
You
than
know-
that, the state ASA commissioner,
Joe Barber.
saw him throw the trophy in
Yeah.
the garbage, and he wanted us to apologize before
doing
the
that.
next game over the mic. I mean, talk about stupid.
Right.
I mean,
I didn't remember that.
well, we didn't.
Oh,
We
okay,
didn't,
that's
we
why I
didn't
didn't
do
remember
it.
it.
You know what? I mean, that would have been insane.
But that was Barry. It wasn't a phony. He wasn't being a phony.
Right.
Oh, Barry played to win. Barry played to win, and it was at second place on it. He didn't want a second place trophy, so he threw it in the garbage pail.
Right. And your attitude was Kasden again sponsored the team, and they were going to want that trophy. So
Right.
you needed, whether it was second place, third, it still had to be on
Right,
that
but
shelf.
we were not going to apologize for wanting to win.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
Barry could have done it
Those
a
were
little
two different.
different
Yeah, those
way,
were
but-
two different things.
Right, correct.
Right. Now, who are some of the other players that really stand out for you that were on this team? And there were so many great ones. You talked about Steve Tracy with his arm, and you know he was a great athlete. You know, as a high school player, he was tremendous as well. But who else?
Mike Homkovic.
Mike Homkovic,
could run
yeah.
like a deer.
Yeah.
Right.
Like a deer, hit the ball a ton.
Joe
Jeez.
Zarnecki played against us and a little bit with us. He was a great.
Not
player.
much with us,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You touched on Eddie Glenn, who couldn't hit, but boy, you hit the ball to shortstop, you were out.
What an arm he had too.
Jimmy Sly, to me, was one of the best ball players we ever had.
Yeah, Richie
Right.
Bryce.
Richie Bryce.
I mean, obviously Freddie Kumo
Freddie
and Kenny
Kumo.
Gohansky.
Right.
Charlie Govia played 1 or 2 years with us.
Yeah. Even though he didn't play as well as he did with other teams.
No. And Rudy Skronsky was one of the most intense players we ever had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glenn Canton.
Glenn Canton came in and pitched the last couple of years.
Yeah, Jack didn't like him because he was a pitcher.
No, actually, I did like him because if you recall by then, because of the coaching, I
That's
kind of
right.
wasn't playing
You
much.
weren't playing much,
'Cause I,
right.
I had too many commitments during the summer, and hey, if you couldn't make a commitment, then somebody had to take your place.
Wasn't
That's,
worth it,
Yeah,
right.
as
Right.
simple as that.
Yeah.
He was better than I was, so I never had a quarrel with that. It's funny the game that we lost to Preston in the championship game. Now keep in mind, I was coaching at that point. I didn't pitch that game.
No.
Okay, no. I ended up pitching the last couple of innings. But,
Who pitched that? Who started?
I had John D start because he pitched better against them. Okay.
Right.
It was as simple as that. If somebody was a better player, they played.
He said, but
Right.
we knew if John D was pitching, the shortstop and second baseman would move to the middle because we knew he wasn't going to cover the middle. When Jack pitched,
Right.
Jack would pitch, and he'd be behind second base after he let the ball go.
Now, answer me this. John D's mother was at every one of his baseball games. Did she ever make an appearance at these softball games? Did she ream them out?
She was the best. She was the best. You have to ask umpire Jim Carey.
Oh, Jimmy.
I think one night he wanted to throw her out of the game.
Really?
It was a game at Noah Field. She was on his case. I think she even threatened to bomb his house. She was the best.
Right.
She was the best. I mean, and so was John's father. I mean, just again, we had good people all the way around.
You know, the funny story he tells about his mother is there was one game his pitcher had reached the amount of innings you could throw, so he had to take him out. So she doesn't really know the rules.
Yeah.
So she
Just when
comes
he's coaching for Derby High.
Right. She comes up to him and she goes, "Johnny, what's the matter with you? This kid's pitching great. Why'd you take him out?" He's like, "Well, Mom, he reached the innings. It's the rules. I have to do it." She goes, "Johnny, so cheat." You know. So she
wanted to win too.
Right. So things like that.
Well, you left two out. Freddie Gracken, who can hit the ball a mile.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And George Buzniak.
George Buzniak.
Another
Felt bad
great
for
athlete.
George, who's in the Derby High Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Right. Some say the greatest athlete Derby ever had.
I mean, he
One
could
of
do
them.
anything. He could do anything. He played with us really only half of a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, could he drive the ball, I bet?
George could do anything.
Right.
Okay.
When he wanted to.
When he wanted
Like
to.
Gary Zenas.
Right.
Seymour.
Gary,
Right.
another one.
Yeah.
I remember our team record for most consecutive hits was 12 or 13. And George got to 12. And, of course, he wanted to do it with a home run to break it. And, of course, he flied out. But he was a good player. You know, George, had some issues back from
the
Vietnam.
war,
It was a challenge, but you can never take anything away from George as an athlete. I mean, he just, I can't think of anything he couldn't do. Baseball, basketball, football.
Right.
Probably the greatest set of hands I've ever seen on anybody in the Valley. He just,
Yeah, I
Great
remember Tony Pisander at the Hall of Fame ceremony. He talked about how he had 20 touchdown passes, and George looked at him one day and he said, "You don't really think you're that good, do you? Because most of those touchdowns that I caught for you, I made you look good." So, George said things like that.
and that was a team that didn't throw the ball.
Right.
Imagine what they'd have done by today's standard of play.
Right. So let me ask you this. In the 15 years, I believe it was 15 years you guys were in existence, how many championships? I mean, Jack, I know you have to have the number. How many would you say Kasden won, if you had to guess?
I really couldn't. I think we probably won the VIL 10, 11 times, and I think we
Wow.
won the Valley Major League 7 or 8.
Right.
I don't think we ever finished lower than third. But, it was competitive. Dave mentioned we were not the only good team. There were lots of good teams here. And,
And you both were coaching high school teams at the time you were doing all this. I mean, Jack, you were probably, if I do my math right, you were probably in your 5th season with Shelton, maybe even longer than that.
well, not when we started. Cause,
right, but I mean towards
I was coaching grammar school.
Right,
back
towards
then.
the late
Right.
70s, though.
And, the late. In fact, that's when I had to back out when I became the Shelton High coach because we had summer basketball and whatnot. So, I had to phase out and, I'd be a spot filler in at that point in time. But,
Right.
Still enjoyed it. But
Well, I believe Bill McAllister, I think Jim Delavope told me this, that he told Jack and a couple others, you better decide, is it Ansonia football or is it Kasden softball? And that's the thing that's kind of a shame because really when you're going to coach those sports, it's very hard to be able
Full-time.
to fit the
Full-time
time
yeah,
in.
and I think it's even harder now. But look, people go through different phases in their life. We're fortunate, those that had the chance to play with Kasden, that we could make the commitment and be able to play. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And even in the summer, I still played with other teams when I was playing with Kasden.
And now if I'm not mistaken, you two didn't really know each other till
No.
softball started,
Nope.
right?
Met him at Bradley School, the
Yeah.
first practice.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that yourself, Jimmy, and Jack were there from the beginning to the end, correct?
Well, apparently I was 70, so. 'Cause
Right.
But
right,
yeah,
so-
I was
right.
there to the end. though. I was the only
he
one
was there
left.
from the year that it really started.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you, obviously Jimmy's your brother, he's your friend, but you three really developed a great friendship.
Oh, yeah. I'd go
Right.
over their house.
Yeah.
We play wiffle ball
Right.
on East Street.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, the funny thing is, I learn something new all the time because I always look at the Walsh brothers and I think of Kasden basketball because they've been in every tournament with, you know, guys like Max, you know, Billy Rado and things like that. But in a lot of ways, I mean, you know, you're more known for Kasden softball. Or what would you think if you had to guess?
Well, you know, Kasden started much earlier, even though we were playing basketball at,
Yeah, but
at the
see,
same time.
basketball,
You know,
It didn't
people
get the
in baseball
write-up.
at the time.
It
No.
didn't
Right.
get the write-ups like the softball. So I think both of them are more well-known for softball.
Right.
Very good at basketball, but
No, you know,
softball.
again, I never claimed to have been a good player at anything. I was a competitor, but I was not a good player.
You're a good
Right.
pitcher. Yeah, you're
I
wrong.
was
Yes,
pretty good
no.
You know, the
Defensively.
other thing I learned too is, and I was reading all this to try to research it, and you know, you had guys like on your basketball team. I'll use John Sappho as an example. Now, John loved basketball to the point where he would go look at his points after the games, but
He could shoot, though.
right, he could shoot, no doubt about that. But John played in the softball leagues too. I
Sure.
mean, he was a very good
was a pitcher.
softball player too, as was his son Jay. I mean,
Yeah.
I would never think John would play any sport but basketball because John was the type of guy that if you played a 10-year-old kid and he was out on that floor, John was not going to give you any
Oh,
leeway.
he was competitive.
Yeah.
In fact, quite honestly, we didn't get along with John.
Really?
Okay, no. He was the enemy. And then years later, strangely enough, I ended up playing basketball with John in Shelton. I was playing in an over 30, maybe it was over 40 league by then against John. And he called me one day to play with his team with Bob Riggio, another
Oh, wow.
a coach, and so I ended up playing with him, and that's how John ended up eventually playing with us in those the league in Derby.
Right.
You know, by the time John started playing with us in Derby,
I think he was
yeah,
probably
we were-
50.
yeah, we were,
He was,
and we were over the hill. So by the time John started playing, you know,
Right.
because we were playing against guys much younger. You can't fool yourselves. Younger players are going to beat older players.
Basketball, yeah.
now, when you guys stopped playing with Kasden, I mean, there's always been that Derby league that's been, you know, I don't know if it's there anymore, but it was around forever. I mentioned PYMC, Adzimos. I mean, did you guys ever spot play for anybody on those
I did.
teams?
I played with JC's in Shelton, me and Freddie Kershaw for 1 year.
Right.
And I knew all those guys too, but I knew I was done. It wasn't the same. If you don't play with the same intensity, it's not worth going out there.
Right.
I played with, I think it was Adzimos,
Right.
Ads. And again, I played in Shelton with some good teams in an over 40
Right.
league.
Now you're in the over 70 league.
Well, I'm still playing basketball, but not so. I wouldn't play softball. I'd be afraid to play softball.
There's nobody out there. And you go by the fields are empty all the time, all
Right.
summer.
Well, you know, unfortunately, I think just as the pitchers killed fast pitch because the pitchers got to be too good, home runs killed slow pitch.
Right.
You know, when we started playing, if you went to Ray Bessis and you hit it out of Ray Bessis, you were a god because
Wooden bats.
wooden bats, there were very few people who could hit it out. By the time we finished playing, second baseman, no offense, Dave, but second baseman, usually smaller guys, were hitting it out regularly.
You're
And
right.
you knew there was something wrong when they had to put in rules that limited the number of home runs that you had. That, you know, by whatever classification we're in, after 3 home runs, next one
It's
was
an
an
out.
out.
It's
I
an
mean,
out.
Yeah, I think
It wasn't softball
I
anymore.
mean,
Yeah, that's-
that happened to Jeff Toney, where
Yeah.
I think
Right.
he was 20 for 20, and he hit another one. They had to call it as an out.
right.
So I mean, that was the only way to kind of, you know, keep it fair or whatever. Because I mean, guy like him, he could probably hit a home run every time he bats.
And the equipment, just like in golf now, the equipment is so much better than
Yeah.
bats. are
Titanium
unbelievable.
bats that cost $500.
Yep.
Again, bats were
Now let me
kinda
ask you about
controversial.
that. Did Kasden, did they supply the equipment for you guys, or did you guys
The
just bring
balls
your?
they did, not the
Yeah, the
bats.
balls. Most people wanted to go out and buy their own bats.
Bats.
Kasden paid all the fees
We were
and the
fortunate.
uniforms. But we never milked it. You know, people's personal stuff, you know, they got that on their own.
But we did have 4 uniforms.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You know, so you had to, like, I wasn't joking about putting your uniform in the trunk of your car and watching these guys because you would
Right.
never play. You know, we would never play. We weren't smart enough to figure that out.
Right.
We had a chart that said what it would be, but again, we had different uniforms. We weren't necessarily the best team, but we were the best dressed team in the Valley
every year.
But it was a lot of fun.
But let me ask you, I brought up Paul Sponheimer, and I don't know if you saw the interview I did with him, but I had him on about a year ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said was, I brought up how he played with Kasden softball, and he said, oh, yeah, he goes, the Twins, they had that rule. If you didn't wear the right uniform, you didn't play. And he goes, and that's something I took with me at Seymour. So, I mean, it's got to feel like a great compliment. It had to, for like you and your brother to know that they took little things from that softball team and they implemented it into their own programs that they coached.
I take a great deal of pride in all the guys that played with Cass. And, it's just not the coaches. I mean, Dell became a mayor.
Yeah.
Charlie was the superintendent of schools. I mean, most of our guys stayed in the Valley.
Right.
Okay, and made contributions in other areas besides just softball.
You knew that the Walsh boys were good because they were so disliked by other players.
Yeah.
And that's a compliment. That is not a dig. That's a compliment.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. We
You
played
played by the rules.
I'm
Absolutely.
shocked
and
that-
expected other people to do that.
I'm shocked to hear that you got thrown out of a game. I would think you would be the one to calm the player down when he was going.
No. Maybe Jimmy. That would be surprising, not him.
I was competitive. I like everybody on our team. I wanted to win, and I was really offended because to this day I don't think that call was right.
You talk about one game, it was really hot, but I say to myself this: all those tournaments you had to drive to, those were the days where not a lot of cars had air conditioners. So, I mean, you guys would have to go in the, hot sun, driving cars to those places. Jack Hunt talked about it one time where he finally had to pull over because he was so hot.
Yeah, but you have to remember, that's because Jack had his own van.
Right.
That.
But, I mean, just those was the traveling a pain, or did you enjoy it?
No, we loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, God, we loved it.
Yeah, we had a ball.
Was there any tournament that stood out to you the most that you loved more than any others?
The one we won in Vermont.
Vermont. Okay, I was going to the one we won in Harrisburg. The one in Vermont was a good one,
To me, that was the one that, again, didn't we lose early and keep coming back?
I didn't play in that one.
Yeah, we lost
I wasn't
early there.
Yeah.
Jack Hunt hit a 380-foot home run, and the place was packed. And other than our wives or girlfriends that were there, everybody was against
that
us.
picture I posted on Facebook the other day, I think.
The one
of
with
the team
blue.
that won in
Vermont.
Vermont.
I have that in my bar. It's up
Yeah.
there.
I think that was the blue uniforms, right? Was
no,
that
the red.
one?
That was the red
The
uniform.
red
The
uniforms.
red
with
ones.
the
okay.
shorts.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, see, got a color code everything.
Ready.
Right. That's amazing to me, too, is that every year they kind of gave you a different uniform over the years. Like it evolved where you didn't always wear the same type of uniform.
Well, what would happen was we would keep the old ones. So we didn't get new uniforms every year. Okay?
Right.
Keep in mind, it's over 14 years. So
They were expensive, too. They weren't cheap.
Right.
that was the big change. When Mr. Fitz bought that first set of uniforms, he just went over and got whatever was available. And if you look at the major leagues, there was a transition in uniforms, okay, from the old baggy, hot flannel to modern, better fitting stuff. Even though I hate to say it, the way they dress now is, I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
But, Kasden put a lot of money into it. And, that's why we were such sticklers on
Now,
that.
do you have any of the old uniforms that you kept? Or
Well, my niece had put up on one of my birthdays at my bar. It's framed by Nicky Bahoon, another gentleman that played with us.
That's right.
Right.
It's framed. It's the Kasden uniform, the red one.
Yeah.
No, the blue one. I'm sorry, it's the blue one. But the picture of us winning the tournament is there. And when I went in, I got really upset with her. I don't. This is nuts. But she was doing it on a.
It was nice.
And it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Now, Nick Bahoon, that's interesting that you brought him up because I saw him at the Thanksgiving game, and a good story he told. And I have to believe this association happened with Kasden softball. Now, your brother Jimmy had just got his law degree or whatever, and he
Yep.
took a few of his degrees to
Yep.
Nick, and he said, "Could you frame these degrees?" And Nick said, "Sure, no problem." Well, Those stayed at Nick's house for over 45 years.
It was a long, long time. Yes,
Yeah,
it was.
Nicky just told me that 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, so that was an interesting story.
He also made the furniture, the desks for my brother's law office.
On that table, that's
Right.
unbelievable.
Yeah. Nicky, when it came to wood, nobody
The
better
best.
than Nicky.
Oh yeah,
The
no,
best.
he was great, and I mean, he's a guy an Ansonia guy who taught in Derby for over
Yeah.
20 years. So I
He
mean,
could hit.
We
he
were
played
actually-
basketball.
He was at 50 years ago with me. He scored the other
Oh,
touchdown.
yeah, okay.
Right.
Well, a lot of guys went and played at Milford Academy. That was pretty common
that's
back
a
then.
big time.
Yeah.
And Nicky was a Conley Park hitter.
Yeah.
Nicky
Right.
loved that pot.
Yeah.
He hit the four one day. Freddie Kumo had tears coming
Yeah.
down his eyes. Don't hit the fourth. And
and
he
Yeah.
whacked it.
you talked about Jack Hunt. You always felt safe with him. Nobody
Oh.
was going to mess with you guys. Well, nobody wanted to mess with Nick Bahoon
Nicky's
either.
strong,
you know,
man.
he's a nice guy,
strong.
but you can't test him.
Well, Jack was a gentle giant.
Yes.
I mean,
He was.
Jack
Yeah.
was so quiet, and yet
Yeah.
he had I think the scariest moment
Sonny's.
in all the years. We had a near riot in the state tournament against Sonny's, and Jack, came out of the dugout when a fight broke out and hit the catcher from
Sonny's kid.
Sonny's, who was a starting linebacker for the University of Maryland at
Really?
the time, and
Big kid. He
Oh.
went right down.
I mean, one shot and
scary.
it went down.
Wow.
I mean, it was a riot. They had to
Eddie
bring the
Glenn.
police.
Eddie Glenn started
Eddie's-
it.
Yeah, sliding it or not sliding. He hit the kid.
Yep.
going-
And
going-
it was like Eddie hit the kid, boom. Eddie went boom.
It was a near riot.
Yeah.
Not
That's
only,
the one John Spineline was climbing over the fence in
Right.
left field.
Yeah.
Wow.
After the game,
Nothing
it was-
happened, though.
No, in the end, everything was okay.
Yeah.
But, actually, the fight turned the tide. We were beating them,
Yeah.
and we lost by a run after
Yep.
that. But Jack, again, gentle giant, nicest guy in the world.
Yes, yeah, he was
Nicest guy
great
in the
guy. He really was. Now, so let me ask you both this: in 2019, it'll be 50 years of when Kasden started. Any chance to be one reunion game? You guys play against some old timers?
We shouldn't have a
maybe?
reunion game, but I think we should have a reunion. See,
And I say, Jimmy and I did all the organizing in years past. I'm all in favor of a reunion, but I'm not doing it.
well, 8 years ago, Preston had a reunion,
You're right.
and ironically, they had it at my bar.
Yes.
All the
Right.
Preston guys were there, and it was, we had Charlie Damlin played with both
Yes.
teams. Jimmy Dell played with both
Yeah.
teams. Jimmy Sly played with both teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's something that we could look into.
Yeah.
I could probably handle it.
No, it'd be a good idea, but again, you know.
But I'm not asking 125 people.
I know we had a Duchess reunion, but it wasn't for the sports. Several of the guys that played either softball or basketball with Kasden worked at Duchess.
Right.
Okay.
Johnny Marquette.
And back then, it was
Yeah.
just a drive-in, right? It wasn't an
Yeah, it
actual
was just a
sit-down
drive-in.
place,
Just
right?
a drive-in. There was no sit-in. It was modeled after McDonald's, and Bernie Ladd was the owner, and Bernie's brothers were great athletes, particularly basketball players. So there was a Duchess basketball team as well as softball.
What
team.
I always heard too about that Dutch's drive-in is that's where the news broke that Coach Ron Carbone was leaving to go to Ansonia. Pop Shorto came in the Dutchess, the Derby guys were there. And
That was my senior year. I
right,
had Carbone.
right, and Pop Shorto was rubbing it in, and I forget who it was. Barry might have been there. Barry wanted to go out and fight Pop. So it's just funny things like that. You would never guess, but.
Yeah, Duchess is a great place. It's the hangout for kids during the summer. They'd be circling in their cars. It was,
That's when Johnny Marquette worked there, and he
John
would
Marquette.
always tell me, slow pitch softball.
Yeah.
What are you guys, nuts? I said, come up the field one day. So he comes up. I said, here, go to play shortstop. He gets out there. Kenny Kohansky hits a rocket at him. He drops the glove. You guys are nuts.
Yeah.
Right in his car back to Dutchess.
yeah.
Or Charlie and Leon's, wherever he was at that time.
So, Dave, let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, you had a great high school career. Ansonia is a big part of your,
Right.
life. How important has Kasden softball been to you in your life?
Well, it's athletically, it would be number one.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I just, Jack and I were talking, the relationships, they don't go away. I mean,
Right.
I won't see Charlie DeCenzo for 4 years. If I see him, the first thing we'll do is we'll talk about something that happened back in 1974 or 3.
Right.
John D., when I see that nut, well, you don't get a word in edgewise,
Right.
but you just nod your head as he talks.
Right.
But yeah, I would say athletically, it was number one.
Right. And Jack, I mean, we know what you did at Shelton as a basketball coach, and, you've had that basketball with Kasden forever, but where does Kasden softball ring for you? How important has it been to you?
I probably wouldn't have done anything else if it hadn't been for Kasden.
Right.
That's where we all started. Again, you can't play 125 or 150 games a summer with people without making contacts that
Last for a
impact
lifetime.
you the rest of your life.
Yep.
Again, we were lucky. It was just a great time. And again, I'll go back to having Lime Katzman and the Sentinel
Right.
publicizing it all. So everybody knew what you were doing. Maybe that wasn't always so good,
Well,
but
people walk in the bar, and if I'm sitting there and they say something about Kasden, my wife and my niece will start giggling.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
yeah.
Right.
Well, you got me going. I mean, I had to go up to the attic knowing I
Right.
was going to be here and say, geez.
Well, did you tell them that we'd have stats every week? Stats, at-bats, double plays.
Now, who
put
did the
outs.
stats?
Jimmy, right? Jimmy and
Right.
Jackie.
Well, Zuba did the scorekeeping,
Right.
Yeah.
and then I did the stats after that.
Well, but you did have, we would know
Yeah.
exactly how
Oh,
many
yeah.
put outs we had, how many double plays we turned.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
we had
amazing.
very good records, and in fact, that's the problem.
Now,
I only have records through 82, and I know through 82 we had won. What I say we were
1,000.
961 and 375,
wow.
and then there were
That's
two more,
ridiculous.
and then there were 2 more years after that. So it was well over 1,000. But I don't have the records for those last 2 years. But I can give you the records.
Now, it wouldn't shock me. I bet you probably have everybody's lifetime batting average, correct? Or
I could do
You
it.
could don't do it.
I
I
could
don't
do
want
it,
to know.
but
I had a stamp F7.
let me ask you.
F9.
F9.
Let me ask you this though: would Jimmy make the top 10? You think lifetime batting average? Because for as much as he got on base, I would, or at least top 20.
On base percentage, but I don't think batting average.
Right.
If you
But
go
I
for
mean-
years, Ernie didn't play a lot of years with
No,
us.
he didn't.
Right.
Kenny Kohansky, to me, to this day, is one of the best pure hitters I've ever seen in my life.
yeah.
Everything was a line drive.
Right. Do you know how many
And
errors?
Kenny, we have the errors. I can give you all the fielding.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm sure John D's got a
But
few. right?
Freddie Kuma was probably our
leader.
best overall home run hitter,
Home run
and
hitter.
yet the record for home runs in a season was Kenny Kohansky.
And how many was that?
He had 51 one year.
Jeez.
And
wow.
he was a switch hitter,
Really?
depending on the field.
Kenny never.
He batted left-handed at Conley
Oh,
Park. You don't
okay.
remember that?
Oh, well, it may be at Colony Park.
Oh, he did.
but
yeah.
Freddie hit 44 that year.
Wow. That's
So-
just amazing.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. I think we did a lot of things right, and I know people back then said, "Oh, they're trouble, they're
right.
crazy, and whatnot." But you look, the guys that played with Kasden turned out all right.
You don't stay that many years with the same team unless
Yeah.
you're getting along.
Right.
Right. Well, I really do hope. I know I said it a little jokingly before, but I really do hope you guys have some type of reunion. I mean, I think what you guys accomplished was tremendous, and I really think it did a lot for the Valley because, in a lot of ways, there was such hatred with Derby and Ansonia, especially. In a lot of ways, you guys kind of broke that barrier, and just realized it's a game, and you guys were able to develop friendships.
For the
And it
most
probably
part.
doesn't
For the most part.
probably doesn't start without Kasden softball, and I really do appreciate you both coming on today to talk
Anytime.
about
Thank you very
It
much.
was a lot of fun, Mike. I think this and your TV show just critical for the Valley. You're bringing back a lot of great memories for a lot of people. So
Well, I
I
do
appreciate it.
appreciate
we
it.
do
so-
have the reunion. We'll invite you.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I'd love
Because it'll
to.
definitely be a Barone.
Definitely.
I'm going to tell John D's in charge of it.
There you go.
Thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that was Dave Barone and Jack Walsh for Kasden softball. And for Valley Sports Rewind, I'm Mike Cannici saying goodbye, everyone.